Well, I remember the day very well. I was 5 years old, and we were playing baseball in my grandmother's front yard. And finally, my mother called, and after I'd been begging to take piano lessons for a couple of years, and there was my aunt waiting for me with my first book, and I was able to take my first piano lesson. And I remember you had to hit C, C with your left hand, right hand. And I was so excited, and I did that so well that we actually, in the first class, we worked our way through the whole book. So, and I practiced, and so for a while I was going through a book a week, or per lesson, learning piano, but it was just, I had always wanted to play the piano. I watched my mom, my aunt, my grandmother, so I have very fond memories of those first lessons.
And who was the first teacher?
Oh, that is my aunt, Lois, and who's now gone on to her glory. And she was a wonderful mentor. She was also an organist at our local church. And so when I was 12, I became the organist. And I say small country church, but it's a parish now of probably 600 people. But so that the combination of my aunt mentoring me and my grandmother making sure, and my mother and father making sure I was practicing all the time, because I was given the alternative. I could either go out and do farm work. I was raised on a farm. I could either go out and do farm work, or I could practice. So you can guess which one I chose.
So you had just music ringing in your ears 24/7.
Oh yeah, and we were this die-hard Norwegian Lutheran family, and so if we weren't on the farm or in 4-H, we were at church. So I had these wonderful opportunities in the community to be able to perform, to practice, to grow, and everyone supported me. And also the school system, even from a little kid, because I was a trombonist when I got in the 4th grade. Back then, the schools, I think in this small country town, it wasn't even a town, it's a township, we had a couple of bands in our grade school, and we had chorus programs, and so I just had this wonderful, I was surrounded everywhere by these kinds of arts, fine arts.
Who was your first teacher outside of your family?
After my Aunt Lois, she thought I had surpassed her, I ended up going with, David Bremmel. He lived down by the duck farm. And so I would go every week and take, that's probably about the time I was 11 or 12 when I started playing the organ at the church. And I studied with him for several years until he said, you really need to go to the big city and study with a teacher there, the big city being Racine, Wisconsin. Now, we're talking 100,000 people, not a city. But anyhow, I learned a lot from David, and I was fortunate enough to see him on and off until he passed away also. This is making me feel old because all my teachers have died. But he was just a wonderful gift also in my life. Then that revelation of that this could be a living. The revelation actually came when I was about 13 or 14. My grandmother took me on a trip to Scandinavia. We went to she was an immigrant, so we went back to visit all the family that we were in touch with in Norway. But after we were done visiting the relatives for 6-7 weeks, then she took me on a trip through Norway, Finland, Sweden, and Denmark. But when we were in Helsinki, I remember walking into the Stone Church. It's called the Stone Church, and I look it up on the internet once a month to make sure it's still there. And there was an organ playing. And that moment changed my life. I heard the organ. It was the first time I heard a really authentic pipe organ being played. And I remember it was Wacht auf by Bach. And I bought the vinyl. Back then that was 33s. And I listened to that thing until the jacket wore out, the record wore out. And I knew at that point I wanted to be a musician. That's what I wanted to do for life. And I didn't know if it was going to be piano or if it was going to be organ or what it was going to be, but it was going to be music. It was just not even an alternative.
Beautiful. Beautiful.
Isn't that a great story?
Oh! Oh!
I'm dying to go back. I was 17 years old, and I was a freshman at Luther College. And I was a piano major, but I thought, oh, I'll try out for the choir. And so that is when I met Weston Noble. And he was the main choir director, especially for the Nordic choir at Luther College in Decorah, Iowa. And that man changed my life. And that's when I started falling in love with choral music. I had really never been exposed to that before. And it was his, and to this day, how I direct a choir is based on his techniques and his philosophy about music, and combined with my other life experiences, but that every choir rehearsal is an educational experience for me and for everyone in the choir. And that is Weston Noble. And also trying to, it's also every one of those rehearsals is a spiritual experience. So it's just beyond gratifying. Even if you're having a bad day, which we all have them, and I'm begrudgingly driving an hour and a half to get to my rehearsal in Zapopan because I live in the countryside now. And so I have to go deep into the city, and I have to deal with 48 people who, they're wonderful professionals, but they're all coming after a long days of work. And I'm like, oh, I really don't want to do this. And all of a sudden we start singing, and I start directing. And life changes for all of us in the room. And it's because of Weston Noble, because he taught me and everyone else he touched how to do that, how to make that transformation.
And how does that happen?
It's through technique of number one, that you have to approach the music from a technical standpoint.
Everything's always a process.
Yep. Oh, it's a process.
Always.
And what I love is the process. You know, by the time the concert comes, I'm ready to go home. Maybe some other people can relate to this, but the concert is not the excitement for me. It's actually the letdown, because I'm into the process and of making it happen. And I think it's the tools that I use, that I've been taught and that I've gotten from a lot of different directors, that create that excitement, whether it's how to pronounce not every word, but every syllable. I expect that every syllable is going to be pronounced the same way by every person in the room, no matter where they come from, what their linguistic background is. We all have to form the same vowel. So I have a lot of challenges living in a foreign country, depending on what choir I'm directing. Sometimes I'm directing a choir with people from 14 different countries, and thus I'm afforded a big challenge. But even if I'm in my professional choirs in Mexico, well, a lot of these people come from different parts of Mexico, and their vowels are a little different. They say their consonants in a different manner. So I have to bring that group of 48 singers to be thinking and doing the same thing at the same time. And so they learn how to do that so that it's an exponential type of growth. Good luck. No, there's a lot of room for new artists in every area of music and dance and the whole world of the fine arts. But I think it's always keeping your eyes in the distance. I think I have many times in my life decided that I was going to leave music. In fact, when I moved to Mexico, I was never going to I left all my music in Chicago, And I was never going to touch the piano again. I was never going to direct again. It only lasted about 6 months, but I wasn't. And I got all my music back. But what happens in the short term doesn't matter. You have to keep looking at the big picture. Remember that music will never leave you. So you have to keep going no matter what it takes. Sometimes it's important to have money, because we all have to eat. And I'm fortunate because when I was in university, I was a music major, but I was also a business major. So while I lived in Chicago, I also was a business person. I had a full music career, and I ran a publishing company and worked in infection control and with the CDC. And so, yeah, it was a lot of work, but that is what helped me get to where I am today. I think a lot of musicians just think, and artists, oh, I'm going to create art and they're going to give me a job. That isn't how it works. We have to create our own jobs. We have to create our own life, and we have to create our own existence. And that is what I think has been the key to my existence. Even, for example, moving to Mexico, I had to learn the language, I had to learn about the culture. I decided to become a citizen so that I could work for the government, because I knew that all the music organizations that really paid well were run by the government. And here I am, that I have a coveted position working with the government, and I've worked as a guest conductor at the Bellas Artes in Mexico City. And but it's because I always kept looking in the distance, and I think that's the key to success.